So, that Nintendo Direct was okay. I mean, looking at it objectively, it was pretty good. The new Peach game looks interesting, Splatoon DLC is always cool to see, Mario vs Donkey Kong is getting a well-deserved remake, and Funky's back in Mario Kart. But the most shocking thing to me from the whole Direct was the announcement of a new 99 styled game, which just so happens to be F-Zero 99. Now, anybody who knows me personally likely knows that I'm a huge F-Zero fan. I think my overwhelming amount of playtime on GX, along with the retrospective that I made last year, illustrate that well. I adore its unforgiving yet satisfying gameplay that inspires players to master the controls and track design to succeed. I found completing each game to be such a rewarding experience, and I praise the series quite often. I'm of the belief that F-Zero GX specifically is one of the greatest racing games ever made. It truly perfected the F-Zero formula and was a great send-off to the series, at least on consoles. It turned 20 this year though, predating myself, so I was never around for any kind of build-up to release for any game in the series. Even though GX was near perfection, the series has an endless amount of potential and it's still left untapped. Until now. F-Zero 99 is similar to the likes of Tetris 99, Pac-Man 99 and Super Mario Bros 35, in that a bunch of players compete in a tweaked version of F-Zero for first place. Mechanically, it's mainly based on the original game, which is seen in its controls and art style, but blends in a few mechanics from X and GX, like boost power and the spin attack. Boost power is now usable on every lap instead of from the start of lap 2, which I'm mixed on. I like that the first lap mainly consisted of players racing slower and more carefully, trying to perfect turns before the race started to get even more tense from the very start of the second lap. Boost power still works the same as it did before, it still uses up energy each time you use it, making it a risk versus reward mechanic, so I'm not too torn up about its appearance here, but the spin attack has been severely nerfed. In X specifically, performing a spin attack was always a conscious decision, since you were giving up a lot of speed in order to try and eliminate an opponent. Plus, getting 5 eliminations in a single race rewarded you with an extra life, so there was always some kind of reward for taking the risk and pulling one off, especially on higher difficulty since the game got very challenging toward the end. In 99, the spin attack now has a cooldown, which makes it more balanced, but since there are so many players on the track, each race will be extremely chaotic, and it's very hard to use effectively. You'll often find yourself spamming it when surrounded by a bunch of other machines with little to no effect. I do like the newly added Skyway boost, which you can access by collecting super sparks found on the tracks, but it's really just a small temporary shortcut. It falls in line with the mechanics of the series, but I feel like it could be more effective than it is. Well, as long as the game keeps all the mechanics in the spirit of the series, it doesn't matter, right? Well, that's wishful thinking. I feel like there are 3 big problems with F-Zero 99 which annoy me to no end. The first of which is the gameplay. As much as I respect the ambition behind an idea of having 99 players in a single F-Zero race, I do not think it works very well. Since this game is mainly based on the original game, it's only made up of tracks from that original game. If you'll recall, I don't think that the track design in that game is all that great. It's very condensed and asks players to be very precise to even get around certain points of the course. This isn't a massive issue when you only have 4 players on the track at once, even if the CPUs are constantly behind you, because you'll rarely get any huge obstacles besides hazards, sharp turns and the occasional other machine. In this game though, the combination of the combined track design and 98 other races on the track at once causes so much bullshit to happen to the point where it becomes frustrating. You'll rarely go a second without a bunch of races on your ass unless you're insanely skilled, so most races will end up being so chaotic to the point where all you can do is loosely follow the track design and pray you don't get blindsided by someone from behind, sending you flying all over the place. Good fucking luck trying to do well on Deathwind with the bullshit win mechanic pushing you all over the place along with all the other machines in play. None of this is helped by the fact that the controls are nearly identical to that of the original game, which aren't good at all. You do get more than 1 turning speed now, so that's at least something, but the physics haven't been changed at all, so hitting a wall is just as detrimental as before, which is now even harder to avoid since there are so many races on the track at once. It's hard to even use your boost strategically, since you don't know if the next second you'll be screwed over by another player coming up behind you, which could cause you to lose a ton of your energy. You're probably best off only boosting once or maybe twice per lap, since the refill zones barely give any energy, just like the original game. The idea behind a 99 player F-Zero is an enticing one, and I can see people making the argument of, well, X and GX had 30 races concurrently and that worked perfectly, so is this really worse than that? And to that I say yes, because because 1, there are 69 more races on the track here than in those games, which is more than an extra 200%, and 2, the track design in those games is a lot wider and more freeform with much smoother controls. Those games can get away with having relatively high player counts at one time because the games are designed around that fact. The original game isn't, so by proxy it doesn't work. My second big problem with F-Zero 99 is that I find it lacks barely anything to call its own besides its high player count. Sure, the original game only had 4 different machines, but in the sequel they added 26 more, and in the next sequel they added a further 11, capping out at 41 different machines to pick from. With the amount of players per round, I'm honestly surprised that we didn't at least get all of X's machines too. It wouldn't have been that hard, they're all just sprites in this game after all. Instead, you just get the same 4 machines repeated over and over again with occasional colour swaps, that's it. I think people forget that, ever since the first game, the series had quite a bit of lore. Granted, at the start we only really had a basic story to go off of, but by the time X rolled around we had another 26 pilots added to the roster with almost all of them looking distinct from each other. And when GX released, they took this a step further, with character profiles for each pilot viewable in-game, along with character-specific theme songs and FMV movies that play when you beat a cup on a high difficulty. All of this goes such a long way to giving the game a unique kind of personality. It has a cheesy tone, and the wide variety of personalities shown in the pilots and dangerous environments you race through helps show off a more serious side to that. Sometimes in my free time I boot up GX to read the character profiles and listen to the character themes. It's really relaxing for me to just lay back and read up on some of these interesting characters. It makes pilots like the Skull and Black Shadow some of my favourites from a conceptual standpoint. F-Zero 99 only having 4 different pilots is disappointing because a lot of the personality that the series is known for doesn't exist in this game. You barely ever see the pilots outside their machines, so the game honestly feels quite soulless. Perhaps my biggest issue with the release of this game is one that has been consistent with the F-Zero franchise for a while. Its legacy is severely understated. Look, even though I don't think the gameplay is very fun, I'm happy that we technically got an F-Zero game in the modern day. But I honestly think it's quite insulting to the legacy of this series that it's been reduced to the status of a free-to-play battle royale game. F-Zero is one of those Nintendo series that is popular online and with fans, but also one that Nintendo refuses to properly acknowledge most of the time. Ever since Climax released in 2004, F-Zero content and references in games have been relegated to Captain Falcon in Smash, Mute City and Big Blue tracks in Mario Kart 8, a minigame in Nintendo Land, re-releases of older games on NSO, that's really it. It's disappointing to see so many characters, so many locations, so many ideas, so many amazing soundtracks forgotten about. I like Captain Falcon as much as the next guy, but Nintendo treating him like he's the only part of this series that's worth remembering is incredibly annoying. So many of these cool characters have been forgotten and are likely never going to appear again, and it honestly saddens me. I'm tired of them acting like Mute City and Big Blue are the only 2 locations from this series that matter, because they're arguably 2 of the most boring. Port Town is ambitious and complex, Lightning is eye-catching and striking. Why are none of these places worth bringing back? I just don't understand. I can't help but feel like people are blinded by the fact that we got a new F-Zero game, instead of being concerned that this game is essentially a shameless retread of old ideas that doesn't do much to impress besides a single new mechanic and some nice graphics. The original F-Zero is already on Switch, so I don't really see the point in this release. It doubles as a frustrating version of that game and a constant reminder that Nintendo is past the point of doing anything interesting with the series, and it's sad to see.